Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second in our series of how to survive or get a job or do pretty much anything in an industry in turmoil. Today, we will be talking about how to get a job in an industry in turmoil. We're going to talk about the industry as a whole, how things have changed since the onset of the pandemic, what job opportunities are available, and then more importantly, where are the jobs, how to get jobs, and any tips or best practices to Zoom your way into a job. So we have three great panelists here today covering the gamut of the audio industry. Before we talk about them, I'm going to start a poll, find out where you guys are from, and see what kind of people are attending this webinar. It's got two questions. So if you could answer those while we're talking. We're also going to, in this webinar today, we're going to be talking about the state of the industry now, where it's going, and what to do about it. So if you could put in questions now in the Q&A, that would be great. We're going to make this very interactive. We're going to base a lot of this on what your questions are, so we can hopefully help the most by responding to those. And we're also recording this, and it'll be posted next week up on my YouTube channel. So if you want to see it again, it will be there. So while you're taking the poll, I want to introduce our panelists. The first one is Greg Beebe. He is the Director of Pro Audio with Sennheiser. We have Susan Vaill, who is a TV editor. She has worked on things like Grey's Anatomy, This Is Us, and many other things. So you're very familiar with her stuff. Oh, Space Force. I knew there was another one I was looking for. And then we have Gavin Lurssen. He's a Grammy-winning mastering engineer, and he's owner of Lurssen Mastering. So we all done with the poll? Almost. So let's end this and see where we are. So share these results. So it's a pretty equal split. So we have students, studio engineers, some live engineers, some film TV editors, manufacturers, musicians, educators, and there's a lot of others. So hopefully we'll be able to help you with that. So please start posting your questions in the Q&A. We're going to start right now. I'm going to throw it to Greg Beebe. And Greg, why don't you start? You're in a different kind of position than our other two panelists. You work for a manufacturer. So why don't you talk about how things have changed in the whole hiring process since the pandemic happened?
I'd be happy to, Karen. Welcome everyone out there from all over the world, it seems. I'm happy to be here today with my two distinguished guest panelists here, Susan and Gavin. So what's changed really is interviewing. The fact is that COVID caused us to really close our offices. So the typical interaction of coming in for an interview and maybe getting a tour of a facility and meeting with a variety of potential colleagues, it went away. I mean, even today, I learned that two offices that had opened up are closing back down again. And Europe is just closed down. So our factory in Germany and our offices in the Netherlands closed. It's just not possible. The government requires us to just not have the opportunity for people to come in. So interviewing becomes very different. I actually just went through a extended interview process to hire a executive in charge of our global marketing, and I never met the person. I never met the candidates. And in fact, if it wasn't for me doing something a little bit naughty and having a barbecue during the summer, I would never have even met the person I hired yet. So the reality is it's tough on both sides. It's tough for people to find the opportunities, and it's tough for the manufacturers to actually engage the candidates.
Do you think that when the pandemic is more under control, that you'll go back to your old hiring practices, or do you think that this has changed everything moving forward?
I think there'll be a tendency to want to go back to the way it was before, because we've been stuck in this parallel universe here for 9, 10 months. But I think what we've learned actually is it's possible. The person I referenced that I had hired to run a global marketing organization just had their 90-day review, and I praised him. I mean, he's doing really wonderfully, and I don't have any criticisms or complaints. And frankly, I've only met him at that barbecue I had. I've never even had a meal with this gentleman. So I think we're going to go back to the way we were, because we're going to have missed it. But the reality is, I think we're going to accept that there's probably something in between that's going to work for everyone,
Okay.
especially on a global scale, right? Because
Okay.
it used to be that you'd fly people from one part of the world or country to a headquarter to do an interview. Well, maybe you can do that now on Zoom, and then you reduce the number of candidates, and then you maybe bring in the 2 finalists to the headquarter.
Right.
That
Okay.
might be the compromise.
Okay. Now, Susan, you had to look for a job as an editor virtually. So how's that changed for you?
Well, I'm a firm believer in the adage that you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. And so my one piece of advice that I always give people is just let people know you're looking. Whenever you have a chance to update your resume, update it and send it out, and just be like, hey, I just redesigned this. What do you think? It's a great way to get someone to read your resume without actually, pleading for a job at the same time. But just, hey, I'd love your feedback. I love to give feedback on people's resumes, partly because I also think, I see a lot of resumes, especially assistant editors who, it's just a list of credits. And, I learned a long time ago that just putting something personal and authentic in your resume, I think makes a big difference. We have a very personal industry in editing, especially like editors and assistant editors. We work closely together. And while the credits tell me, how to do your job, I also, what I'm really hiring you for is if you're a person I want to work with and want to spend a lot of time with. And it's hard over Zoom too. It's hard to do those interviews and to find out who a person is over Zoom. So as for me, my experience during the pandemic, I was about to start a job on March 19th, and it was a pilot that then got shut down. And most of the industry shut down with it as well. As shooting for at least narrative television really stopped and ceased for a while. My friends who were working in documentary, animation, and reality, a lot of them did keep going because a lot of them were working off footage that had already been shot, and they have a much longer post schedule. So the shooting happens up front, and they've got all that footage and material to work with. In scripted television, it's much more, they shoot, give it to me, and then I do it. And without shooting being able to happen, I wasn't able to work very much. I just utilized that time by really amping up my networking, both with people who were seeking my advice and also just staying in touch with friends. The Editors Guild and American Cinema Editors held a lot of events during the pandemic that really promoted networking. And I felt like I was just new friends on Facebook were coming up all the time just through editorial connections. And that was actually really a nice thing to see people really reaching out and very sincerely wanting to connect and mentor during this time, even if work wasn't happening as much.
Okay. So Gavin, you're hiring. That's your position. You'll be hiring people. And there's a question actually in the chat that maybe you can address this also while you talk about that. And the question is, what are some new skills or what kind of mindset should one have going in to go look for work in a pandemic? And how do you do that when you're looking for a mastering engineer or positions like that?
Well, it's such a layered question. We could spend the entire hour on that. One thing to keep in mind as I give perspective on this is I'm also looking for a job every single day. So for 30 years, I get tested and I have to get an A+ every day to make sure I get hired the next day, So I'm in the exact same position. And the creative endeavors and pursuits we participate in to gain employment are that we reach out to people through various means. Currently, social media is a strong platform to use if you can get it right. It's difficult to get it right, and it's also difficult to gain an audience, but you put your best foot forward and what's very important, I think, when I look at it the other way around, when I'm pulling people into the group, is to deal with people that understand the give-take equation. So a lot of young people come in and they show degrees and they show their skills and all of that stuff. But the skills that we look for are beyond just the technical skills on how to use tools to get a job done. There is a place for that, but people skills are also more important. So as I put out our company's name into the ether, into the universe to be known and gain employment, I flip the situation into reverse in terms of what we do. I look for that in people that come in. So it's a two-way street, and everybody who's out there looking for something right now is going to go into a scenario where they get employed by somebody who also needs the same kind of support and is also in that same boat much of the time. We were talking as a panel prep the other day, and Greg and I had a little dialogue about the difference in the people that he looks for versus the people I look for. In my world, we get more entry level because you're not going to get an engineer that comes in. They wouldn't need to be part of our crew. We need the people that are attracted to us are entry level. So the perspectives and the advice I give are more on the entry level side of things. And it's really, I guess, to encapsulate it all right now, it's to say that if there's a way to demonstrate something beyond the technical skills that are easy to attain these days with the schools out there and the way the manufacturers get their gear out and the tutorial videos, which have pretty much replaced mentor relationships, is to demonstrate what you can do for somebody beyond the skills in terms of people skills, in terms of how you're going to help benefit their company, help build their company, and what you're going to receive from it, what you're going to give to it, understanding that both ways, if that makes sense. Having a grasp on that give-take cycle and really communicating the scope of all your skills.
Okay. So Corey was asking, are there any suggestions on standing out as a quality entry-level freelancer with only a small demo reel and stacked up against flooded competition? So which is kind of what you were talking about, right?
Yeah, that question is interesting because, if you're going to put your demo reel out, it's great. It's going to tell somebody how they can grab your stuff to help benefit their thing, but that's something that Susan can probably talk to a lot as well. It's got to be beyond that. You've got to understand how to connect with a person and who you're dealing with and that type of stuff. So that type of stuff is a little bit more difficult through Zoom. But what I also find myself doing in this pandemic is actually in strange ways being more connected to the community than I was before. Because the industry sort of worked in this chain of events type of protocol that had been set up over years and altered by how manufacturers are now replacing mentor relationships, if you look at that. So, record production and TV production, all that stuff, there's a ton of people that work in the same show that never meet each other. The productions go from one link in the chain to the next down the line. And now through this process, we're actually more connected to each other because you kind of have to be. So through that, if you can work your way into the business at any one of those links in the chains where your interest lies, it's I don't know, I'd be interested to hear Susan's perspective on that. But to me, persistence, the obvious stuff that people would say, but getting that human stuff across, I think, is important. That's a big part of it. When we look for people, it's hard to train somebody now. I'll add that to this. If we bring in somebody new, normally we'd sit with them and train them. So we need to have more of a sense of who you are in that and how well you'd respond to sort of offsite training and Zoom training and that type of thing.
Right. Susan, how about for you?
Well, just going back to the question of demo reels, at a certain level, a demo reel doesn't, I personally think a demo reel doesn't do much for you because your credits already kind of are your demonstration of what you can do. However, that being said, with assistant editors, I'm always very impressed when I see that they have a website and that they have put put it together and it looks professional. I mean, that's something I don't have for myself. And so I'm always like, well, they know what they're doing and they're on top of it. So that presentation is terrific if you're able to do that. It's not required though. I think again, right now, just really being able to present yourself in an authentic way that that you're also understanding that, you know, you're there to be helpful. It's hard right now to hire someone who to be an assistant when, you know, that job of assisting is usually like they're right there in the room with you. You know, you're present. They can do small things for you and big things for you, and it's harder to have that happen over Zoom. So even just hearing the expression of like, I want to help you, I'm here for you, what can I do for you, is really important to know, so that, because I think the experience of collaborating right now over Zoom and over Microsoft Teams or whatever format we're using, there's almost this extra step of having to stop and type a request to someone. And so having someone be proactive, like an assistant who is like, I'll check in with you, it helps me because I'm like, I'm trying to do my work. I don't want to have to manage everything. So seeing that someone is proactive and can be productive without me having to micromanage every step of the way, because I'm already staring at one computer. I don't want to have to stare at another one. And like, so that would just sort of be some advice I have in terms of like working in this new modality that we're in.
Okay. Hey, Greg, I have a question for you. It's from Rachel, and it kind of is in the same vein as what Susan just answered. Since personal interaction is so minimal now in hiring, do you have any suggestions that someone can practice to maximize their ability to be hired? Any do's and don'ts in a Zoom call or phone call?
So I think that my response is going to maybe touch upon another question I'm seeing here about being disappointed with LinkedIn and Indeed, because it's a bit connected. So, and again, this is just a personal opinion. If you're trying to network, be authentic. I'm gonna steal a word from Susan because I love the word. I use it all the time. Be authentic. Be who you are. Don't express interest like, you know, hey, I saw you launched a new product. It looks really cool. Hey, I'm looking for a job. Can you point me in the direction of your HR person? Just be direct. You know, hey, I need some help. I live in Colorado. I'm looking for an entry level position. Do you have any openings? Just be honest. And you know what don't be ungrateful for somebody who's going to say, hey, I don't have anything right now, but please take a look at the website because we post all of our offers there. Say thank you for that, and actually occasionally go look, and even better, come back after 2 months and say, hey, I looked and I didn't see anything. Do you know of anything coming down? I'm personally going to always answer those questions for anybody. And what I personally love to see is I love to see ambition and persistence, but also the legitimacy. Just be authentic and show appreciation. Even if even if the answer is no, right? So I recently had a LinkedIn inquiry from someone I had a passing with maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I know the person's name, but I don't really remember much about the person. He reached out saying, hey, I'm trying to find a new home. Can you help? And I said, please send me your resume, your latest updated resume. Within hours, I had the latest resume. And I took the resume and I forwarded it to our local, this was an American, a local HR, and also our global HR. And I responded back to the person saying, I've taken your resume and I've given to our local HR people and our global HR people. Someone will contact you. And then I sent an email to the local and global HR saying, please let me know when someone's spoken to this individual. Within the day, HR said, we spoke back with the person. We don't have anything for him right now. The person on LinkedIn contacted me saying, hey, someone at HR contacted me. Thank you. Please keep me in mind. That is the best case scenario. Best case scenario is just stay positive, stay connected. Things will come up. And before you know it, there's going to be an opportunity. I know we're recording this, so I'm not going to give the number, but we're hiring. Our company's actually we're hiring dozens of people. So it's just about the alignment and timing. You know, is it the right job for the right skill set in the right part of the world?
Okay.
Can I interject something there?
Yeah.
I just wanted to reiterate the importance of, in my world, of what Greg's talking about in terms of authenticity. You know, I get young people that come in, and you know, let's just say that when you're 45 or 50 and you're talking to somebody 22 who's looking for something, there is a sense, you know, you're dealing with two different people with different levels of world experience, and there is some kind of sense that comes about from entering somebody. And like I said earlier, I deal with entry level people more than executive level. So you know, that authenticity, when young people sit there and say, this is what I want to do with my life, I'm convinced of it, sometimes that's viewed with an air of skepticism. And it's much more pleasant to deal with somebody who says, look, you know, I really don't know if I want to do this, but I want to check it out. I'm fascinated by it. When I train somebody, it's a huge financial investment. It takes years, really, when you think about it, to get somebody up to a place that you can leave them alone. So that authenticity is very, very valuable. I can make a decision on whether I want to have somebody hang out in the studio. I see one of from Melinda, some of these comments about the biggest takeaways she gets from these webinars, and then she lists some of these things. They are pretty consistent, but these messages, some have, you know, I just wanted to emphasize that when you're talking to somebody and you just come from the heart as to what you really are, it's going to be better for everybody in the long term, including yourself. It's such a huge, crucial thing, and you know, it's a lot for somebody to train you and bring you up to speed. And if you're not convinced, and this has happened to me, if you're not convinced it's what you want to do, and you pursue it, and then you get trained up, and then you leave because you just don't like the craft. That can be upsetting for everybody, and you'd probably make a bad name for yourself in the process. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Okay. And Susan, you wanted to chime in?
Greg and Gavin and I all talked about this earlier, that, you know, during this pandemic, we've all done a certain amount of mentoring and networking, phone call, like just people reach out and they're like, I'd love advice. And there's three things I wanted to say about that, to have when you reach out to someone and you're seeking that advice or that guidance, which is both, first, be polite, be patient, and be persistent. And that goes a lot to like what Melinda said in her comments here, which really is excellent, which is that please reach out and be respectful, but also be respectful of our time. You know, like it's hard to sometimes carve out time. If someone wants my advice, I'm going to give them at least an hour of a phone call. And so, but email, you know, my email comes in, it just goes away. So I always will try to reply really quick. I'm busy right now, but get back to me in 2 weeks. And I really do tell people, like, just be persistent. I have a family, I have a job. It just, sometimes I forget that I wanted to get back to you. So please, it's on your end, just circle back to me. But one thing I also wanted to say, which has really impressed me, I've talked to a number of students from my undergraduate college, which was Williams College. And I don't know if it comes from that they're from an academic environment, but most of them, I can hear them typing while I'm talking to them. And I realize that they're writing down what I'm saying. And then some of them have texted me back or emailed me back months later that, like, you know, I just wanted to let you know, I followed up on this thing. So hearing back from someone that I spent an hour of my time with means so much to me, that I actually reached them, that, or even at the end of our conversation, that they're like, you gave me some great headlines. These are the takeaways that were really good from our conversation. That helps me also to know what's working in terms of a mentoring conversation with someone. And that's valuable to us too. So,
Right.
and I also just find it's so respectful to know that, like, my words are being taken seriously, and that that people are really listening. That means a lot to, and it makes me want to continue to mentor people when I know that it's really being heard and being valued.
Yeah.
So just maybe just like come back and thank you. This is a great conversation. I also wanted to just add a dimension here, which actually just came in as a question as well. It also is, you know, the old proverb, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Networking, again, done authentically, will pay dividends. I have someone in the industry that I trust who had to make cuts. Their company had to make cuts during this pandemic. And this person contacted me and said, hey, there's 3 great people. They're really great people. And I'm sad to see them go. Greg, do you have anything for them? And I'm proud to say that we talked to all of them, and 2 of them work for us now. And that just came from a referral of somebody I trust. So you never quite know where your attitude and your behavior is going to come back to bless you or haunt you. So always be true to yourself and honest and authentic, because it's a small industry. Once upon a time, someone told me this industry is smaller than the potato chip industry. So just, keep that in perspective, really.
Well,
Okay.
and the relationships that you garner in your community, if you're, again, I'll address, just because it's my level of output to the community, the entry level of the students coming into the business. I do see a question from somebody that wants to know about launching a career at midlife, which is probably all the same advice. But one of the relationships that you generate in your community of student graduates, and the volunteer work that you should always sign up for, because that also pays dividends. Plus, it's the right thing to do, to whatever you receive, to always put back into the community. Whatever energy comes in, that energy should also go out. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to generate these relationships in the beginning. And I cannot tell you how many people I deal with on a professional level that I met at Berklee College of Music 30 years ago. It's amazing the amount of people. It's extraordinary, the amount of people, and these contacts are alive and well. And it sparked in my brain when you used the word trust, because if you know somebody as a student, and then you pretty much know who you're dealing with, and then 20 years later you encounter that person, it comes with an immediate level of trust. It's almost like a branding exercise when you think about it. Branding is a process that develops trust with people, so that they then go out and invest in the brand. But if you then deal with somebody at a record label that you went to college with, that somehow got in the industry, that trust is immediately there, and you just bond and you get to work, and there's a stronger connect. And it's just something to pay attention to as well, in addition to what we're all saying. We're all kind of adding on each other's sentiments here, and from our own perspectives, which is really cool. It's the way humans bond with each other, and trust each other.
Right. Yes,
That's
Susan?
important.
I just that question about like mid-career change, I think a lot of us experienced that during the pandemic. By the way, I opened a pop-up shop and was making face masks, which kind of got me in touch with the old school like experience of editing and cutting and sewing. I was like, it feels a lot like editing. It was very creatively satisfying. So I found a creative outlet for the months while I was also kind of managing my family and online schools. There's a reality of what we've all been going through during this pandemic. That reality hit a friend of mine about 5 years ago, who had been the longtime DVD producer for Grey's Anatomy. And she produced all the DVD extras behind the scenes. And she always had incredible respect for editors, and would frequently do little special segments on the music of Grey's Anatomy and interview the editors. And we just appreciated how much she respected our craft. She then went through, serious medical, cancer, and she beat it. But it was at the same time the DVD industry plummeted. So she had these two major things happen, where she had a life-threatening illness and a career-ending kind of moment in the industry. And she's someone I'd always known and respected so much. And she said, I love editing. I'd love to get into that. That's always been my favorite part of the process. So I've helped for the last like 5 or 6 years. She's mentored her to get into the union, the Editors Guild. She's assisted me on several projects. She's a 50-year-old woman, and it's like I knew she could do it. She just needed the experience. Like she has producing skills and management skills. She knows how to work with talent. She knows how to be in the room with big personalities because of all the years of what she was doing in another industry. So I just want to express, don't be afraid to make a change, but know what your skill set is and how you can transfer that skill set. It was very easy for me to pitch to people her to work for them, because I was like, you're going to love her in the room. Like she is a lifeline and a support, she just needs a few more credits, And so I guess like you can look at what is not maybe what's your inexperience, but try to look at it. What is the asset you can take away from that? And a long time ago, I was coming as an assistant editor out of documentaries. And I was like, I want to get into scripted, but I haven't been doing much in that. And who's going to look at my resume and want to hire me on this this big movie when all I've done is some documentaries. And then I looked at what I'd done in documentaries, and we had no, they're very low budget, no tech support. So I'd actually been my own tech support, and I was very technically capable. So that's how I sold myself. I'm like, look, I haven't done a big movie like yours, but I'm a big problem solver, and I'm not afraid to tackle those things independently. So I kind of looked at my skill set and figured out how I could use it to be an asset rather than, how someone might look at it at first glance and see it as not an advantage. So that's something I just recommend if you're making any career changes or you're feeling like you don't have enough to offer. Figure out what it is that you are offering.
Greg, I have a question for you in the same vein. We actually had a webinar about this, so I'm sure that there are some engineers and producers or want to be engineers and producers on here right now who aren't being able to find jobs. And I know that we've talked about that in manufacturing, even though that might not be the direction you think that you want to go into, that there's a lot of jobs in manufacturing that likes having people with backgrounds as engineers and producers. So can you address that a little bit and the options that are available for those kind of people?
Sure. So, yes, one of the things that I believe strongly in, and it's really building on the word authenticity, really comes from a product perspective. And by product, I'm not just talking about hardware. It could be software, it could be service, whatever. Is not creating said thing in a vacuum, but instead having people who use the thing actually be instrumental in being the architect to build it. So we found that when we, and this is going to sound funny, but when we stopped building things in the dungeons in Germany by engineers who don't see the light of day and started getting people involved and perhaps even leading the projects that people use those services, that our success rate really skyrocketed. So we actually have positions called portfolio managers, product managers, who actually develop the new solutions that the market is asking for, but they come from the market. So today, for example, yesterday I had a conversation with 5 of them, and 3 of the 5 of them were former touring engineers. And these are people who are actually working on pro audio solutions, wireless microphones, software, and some other thing I can't tell you, but it's refreshing because these are people who actually been under fire. They know what didn't work, what failed, and they know what can help make the lives of their peers easier. So all of that tribal knowledge comes in to shape the future. So that's where it can come in quite heavily.
Okay.
Can I say something about that? Yeah. From my perspective a little? It's interesting just hearing you talk like this, because we all are saying the same thing from different perspectives, similar perspectives. One of the things that I enjoy when I connect with somebody and I'm looking for somebody coming into the industry, and this is something I also try to display as I'm seeking employment for myself, for our business. If you demonstrate the ability to see the end product, the end game in what you're doing, a lot of people come in and they say, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. But really, it's the human self that's more impressive to any potential person that's going to pay you money to do something for you. Do you understand what we're actually up to here? Do you have the objective in sight? These tools are just things to use to get to that final place. And there is a difference, but what's interesting about that, I don't want to make it sound like that's all that's important. There's a place for everybody. I've dealt with people who come in who want to be trained by us so they can start their own business. Obviously, that's not going to be so attractive to us to invest in that person so they can go out and build a business that competes with us. However, there is a place for that. And I've pulled in people like that once I know what I'm getting into. Hey, we can connect with each other for a couple of years, and you can do something for us, we can do something for you. It's that give-take cycle. That's where their authenticity pays off. I've had people who want that, but they come in and they don't make that very clear. And you can tell when you've been around, you got some life experience, particularly 50 years and beyond in age. I've found personally that you can kind of tell what you're dealing with. So that authenticity, when it's laid out, is really cool to deal with, because now you know what you're dealing with. There are some people that like to be part of an infrastructure, part of a team. They don't want to be the boss. They don't want to own something. They just want to be part of a cog in the machine. Others who are entrepreneurial want to be, lead the industry and everything else in between. So that authenticity as to who you are needs to come across. And in Zoom and in this two-dimensional world we're living in, there's more connectivity on some level, but that information does need to come across, and it needs to be authentic. And if it isn't, the price will be a big price to pay for everybody down the line. It'll reveal itself, it'll undo, it'll unravel. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there and emphasize that, and the importance of everybody, every cog. The whole machine takes a whole bunch of different size cogs.
I have a question then that refers to this, and I use LinkedIn a lot now when people are talking to me. I will look up their profile, I'll look on Instagram. And so Rachel's wondering, she said, we utilize and lean on social media so heavily now for networking. Do you have any suggestions to help our new engineers how to portray themselves online professionally? Anything you dislike seeing on a profile? So that's open to all of you.
Your Google resume is important. I look at people to see if they're, I look at their social media and see if they're sitting there, drinking beer out of a beer bong. I don't want my clients seeing that, you know what I mean? So, so we look at that. So you should keep a clean Google resume. That's all I'll say to that.
I would say, I mean, just on a very specific thing, the biggest thing on your resume on LinkedIn is the name of the show. And when a lot of people bog it down with like, I worked from, 6/19 to 2/20 on this show, episodes 4 of season 3, it's too many numbers. I can't process it. I think it's not that important. It's like, you can usually tell from a resume if you're an assistant editor, just recently bumped up to editor. It's okay. I just think, put both, editor credits, assistant credits. It's okay if the editor credits are short, I think you can even put a lot of assistant editors will cut on the shows that they're on. I think it's okay to put that as additional editing. You're not going to be in the IMDb as an editor, but you did do additional editing. Usually your editor will vouch for you as a reference. If that's the case, I mean, be sure that they're going to. So I think it's just really important to keep it clear and focused and not get too bogged down in numbers and all this other information, just like I want to be able to look at a resume and really get a quick takeaway of like who you are and what you've done.
Okay. India is asking, what are your thoughts on finding a job working for someone else in a company or studio versus freelancing or starting your own company? Anybody got anything for that one?
Anybody?
I'll just jump in. It's a lot of editors do eventually incorporate, and it's more for just sort of personal finances. But when I did that, a decade ago, I feel like my accountant didn't really warn me that I was creating a second job for myself as a CEO, where I suddenly did have to like do QuickBooks and have that financing together, and that it does affect when you apply for a mortgage. So that is just, I will say, there's definitely stuff to think about in that. I think, Greg and Gavin both are more in the corporate organized world and can speak more to that on like actually starting a company. But if you are a freelancer and you do set up your own corporation, it does require some time as well, and on top of the job you already have. So that was new to me, and I always share that with people. Like when
there is one aspect to that I noticed, because we deal with a lot of independent engineers that are not incorporated businesses; they're just individual entities. And one thing that I've noticed consistently over years and years and years is when we send an invoice out to a label, we've got the incorporated at the end of our title, and we get paid right away. And the individuals that submit invoices to the same labels take 6 months to get paid. So when they see Inc. at the end, they go, oh, that's somebody with an infrastructure, let's take them seriously. And it might be in their financial perspectives there that there's, easier for us to make a legal fuss to get paid versus just an individual. a couple of individuals trying to make a living, but somehow it always works like that, and it's always has, and it's an amazing, amazing thing that always astounds me. But I think there's some power to having incorporated. But yes, it's a whole infrastructure, and it comes with all the insurances and all the, I mean, it's a massive amount of money to spend to have that infrastructure and to manage. It's a lot of time investment. So you're absolutely right about that. There's no question about it. But yeah, we need it for us. But just from a being paid perspective, I'm not sure if you all have noticed that, but I certainly have.
That's a good point.
Joshua is asking, any advice on ways to get real industry experience? I'm a recent graduate from Full Sail University, and the experience I have is limited to educational experience.
Yes. Short answer, yes. We actually have, well, I'll not say the name to protect the person, but we just talked about a Full Sail graduate that is an employee of ours that we've identified as a high potential. And I was speaking to this individual's manager's manager this week saying, we need to tell that person. So we need to get the four of us together and to identify for this Full Sail graduate that has really proven himself quite valuable to our company, to say, first, thank you. You are high potential. You've proven yourself, and we want to now, do more to invest in you. And that all came from the education he earned at Full Sail. I mean, he's doing sales oriented tasks, but in our space, you can't do sales oriented tasks if you don't have some fundamental understanding of the business of audio and input structure and all this stuff that we all know here. And so the answer is yes. We hire Full Sail graduates, and we've been very pleased with the quality of foundational education they come with. So I saw the comment here posted that it's all about getting your foot in the door. It's exactly right. You get your foot in the door. I mean, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I'm working for Sennheiser for over 28 years. This is my first job from undergrad. I didn't start as the president of the company. I started as an application engineer, and 9 positions later, I'm here. But it all starts with finding a company that you can relate to from a value proposition perspective. You don't want to work for a company that has different values than you. And Full Sail teaches really good values. And you also want to work for a company that appreciates your attitude, because attitude, I find I hire for attitude more than skills in some cases, because attitude is contagious. Right? So I often talk about the cancerous effects of a bad attitude. We don't have time for that. We have customers to satisfy. We don't have time for the internal drama. So Full Sail has proven, at least to me, to have strong candidates entering the job market.
Yeah, and places like Berklee College of Music and all that stuff. Once you see that on a resume, you realize it's a starting point. You go, oh, this is somebody who's committed to something. But what's interesting listening to you talk, Greg, is you're a company that shows appreciation for somebody like that. There are companies that somebody can go to where somebody will perform like that and be underappreciated. And the audience, I think it's important to have knowledge of that, because the word consistency comes to mind. If you go out into the world with a good attitude and you end up with a company that doesn't appreciate you versus ending up with a company that does, you have to be that same person that you are. You cannot develop a bad attitude, because then you're giving them the power to dictate your stuff. And that is actually, in my eyes, a sign of weakness, and not a criticism, sign of weakness, but somebody that doesn't feel like, if I see that in somebody, I'm not going to think that they're going to strengthen our team. I'm a company that does appreciate. So I have seen people where they're underappreciated buy into the toxic effects of that. If I see somebody that's stronger than that and rises above it and maintains their consistent self, has a real true grasp on who they are in the process of whoever they're dealing with. Luckily, this person is working for you and you're going to invest in them, and it's give take. It's that whole thing. So that consistency of figuring out who you are is of vital and crucial importance as to how the entire industry is going to see you. And if it is smaller than the potato chip industry, you better be sure to know that within 5 years, everybody's going to know you. If you really are persistent, like Susan was saying, stick in there, word gets around. so that came to mind when I was listening to you right there, that consistency and the importance of it.
I can also think of several examples of they happen to be women that I've known who have not taken failure as the ultimate roadblock and have reapplied and reapplied. Like one woman, she's a very successful director now, and she and I were both in I was in a diversity directing mentorship program through ABC, and I met her at several networking events. She's like, yeah, I can't seem to get into this diversity program, but she just kept applying, and she is skyrocketing now. I mean, she got in, she finally did it. It took several tries. I talked to a young woman who several times applied for an internship at Pixar, and she just, she just didn't get it. She didn't get it. She finally was like, I'm just going to be more honest about who I am. And she's like, when I was a kid, I used to pretend I was a mermaid. And that made them call her, because they were like, are you crazy or are you just creative? But that's how she got the phone call, and she got the internship at Pixar. I had a wonderful assistant editor who I just loved, who was basically given to me on an independent film I cut. And the director was like, yeah, she was a student of my sister. She's just going to help with the dailies. And I was like, oh, great. But I wound up training her. She was so receptive, so smart, that eventually I was like, as soon as you get in the union, call me and I'm getting you on a show. And then we worked together for 3 years, and she took over for me at This Is Us when I left, and is an editor there now. And so it's like, yeah, she just showed me at the time that she was going to be a star. I could just see, just by how she listened and took it seriously. And so it's like, yeah, we all kind of, there's ways to just jump in and find those projects that maybe you're volunteering on, because there've been some questions about getting started. For people in editorial, documentaries, reality are all non-union, independent film. That's a great place to start, and just building up your network, and sometimes doing a job for free. You realize where it's going to lead. But, like for my assistant, Lyson Ho, who's now an editor, I mean, it just paid off within 5 years for her. She's cutting a top rated network drama.
So, Susan, someone was commenting about your rebranding comment and translating skills from seemingly unrelated past experiences. Is it common for hiring agents to connect those dots on their own? Does it sound desperate to try to explain these ideas to a potential employer in a cover letter? And I think that probably all of you can address this.
I mean, I would say just don't talk down to someone, obviously. But I did a mentoring conversation earlier this year with a young man who's been working in, management consulting, but he was from my college, where I'm like, okay, I know you're from Williams. You probably can do, you're amazing. You're intelligent. You just have a general intelligence and education level that I already know. And I was like, I think one of his clients was the US Post Office. And I was just like, if you're applying to work in the business and be a producer, like, it already tells me you've probably got a lot of problem solving and management skills that can apply. So I think it's okay to sort of put your skills in context for people, but let them connect the dots too.
Okay. Gavin, you mentioned, this is from Tom, you mentioned tutorial videos replacing traditional mentoring relationships. Tom would like to hear from the panel your thoughts on how effective this is. And is it still feasible to engage in more traditional mentoring relationships, and what benefits can there be for the mentor as well as the mentee?
This is an interesting topic that many perspectives come at, and they're all right. There's no wrong. When we did a plugin about 5 or 6, maybe 7 years ago with a company called IK Multimedia for our console, and everybody came out and said, "Hey, you're replacing yourself. Well, you crazy?" And my response was, if somebody can cannibalize you, you may as well be the one to cannibalize yourself. And the reason I'm saying that is because, then things like Lander came out, automated doing what we do and all that stuff. And I've always supported all that stuff, because you have to support what's coming next. I was fortunate to come up through a mentor, a guy named Doug Sachs. And I noticed that it was right as the era was ending of all of that. It was beginning to end in the 90s. And it seems to me that the manufacturers have systematically been, well, I mean, everybody's seen it, the digital revolution, everything's become plugins. It's all part of the same conversation. What happened was, all of a sudden now everybody can go make a record for almost free, or $2,000. What used to cost you 30 years ago, $250,000, you know, and you had to apprentice to just maybe get a job sweeping a floor in a studio. Now all of a sudden you can make music. So this is what the industry created. The door was open for it to happen. You can criticize it all you want. It's always going to start out and be a little rudimentary and not as good quality, and all the purists are going to come out and shoot it down. But in fact, it's the way the ball rolls down the hill, and you have to support it and then become a part of it. And if something you see is funky, you get involved and improve it. And that was our thinking behind plugins and future development of stuff as well. So what I saw when I made that comment was that the manufacturers seemed to identify that all of a sudden now everybody's a record producer. You know, everybody's got a Formula One car and is on the racetrack. They might not know how to drive it so much, you know, so they see a lot of wrecks on the racetrack. Okay, well now tutorial videos are kind of the thing, and manufacturers are getting into that. Now everybody else is getting into that, and education is becoming the new mentor. And so that's kind of where that comment came from. It's now this sort of hive mentality of sharing of information, but the manufacturers have to do this to sell gear, because that's their job. They're responsible to do that. So they're spending a lot of time making sure in many different ways to educate people where they no longer have mentor relationships. So I forget kind of what the question was. I just wanted to kind of explain where I was coming from with that, in case it was illuminating on some level. What was the actual question? Or was that, or
I
did
think
that
you
suffice?
answered it.
Okay.
It was about mentoring and tutorial videos replacing traditional mentoring.
And does it work? Yes, that's how it started, what I was saying. I think it's great. You know, get as much info as you can and come to things like this. And these are the new mentor relationships. You know, Susan was saying earlier how she'll talk on the phone to people. I personally, you know, everybody's different. I just don't have time for that. And sadly, because I got to run this business, you know, and keep this crew paid. So what my give is to do stuff like this and interact with people. And I do it a lot. I do a lot of these, and that's where I can do that. So the people that show up, you know, I make note of who's all there and how they're interacting. And one person a little while back said, oh, I think it was a Full Sail comment. It was maybe 10, 15 minutes ago. Somebody said, oh, I only have this level of experience, but you know, instantly I'm going, oh, that person's straight up. Who's that? You know, maybe that's interesting, you know? So I think it's wonderful. I think all this technology that moves on and the digitization of it and all that stuff, it's all great. Connects us, creates a hive mentality, keeps the professionals and the students all in one place, you know?
So we are entering the last minutes of this webinar. So I was wondering if each of you would like to just kind of wrap it up and you know, talk about what you think is most important in this whole looking for a job in an industry in turmoil. So why don't we start with Susan?
You know, one of my favorite anecdotes earlier this year was a young woman who got the ACE internship, and she said she wore a bow tie and her Hufflepuff suspenders to her interview, which, you know, you might think is crazy, but it really represented who she was and that she was interesting and fun. And someone asked, you know, what's something that you did to get noticed? I was on a Tom Cruise movie, and I happened to be reading a David Eggers novel, and the novel was just always in my hand, just because there would be downtime. And the director was Ed Zwick, and it's the only reason he ever talked to me was because he's like, "You're reading a David Eggers novel?" You know, he was like, "Who are you?" And so I just want to say, it's little things like that that I think, you know, connect you to people. And it's just important to keep that in mind, even, you know, on this screens that we're all on right now. And so yeah, that just find ways to create connection. And even if it's just paying attention to the details of what you're representing or who you're talking to.
Greg, you want to go next?
Yes. So I would, this is going to sound very basic, and perhaps you might say this was a complete waste of your time to even hear these words, but it just means so much to me as a human being. And that is to remember what our parents taught us when we were growing up. You know, the golden rule, do unto others as you have done it to you. Please and thank you. I can't tell you how many times I've been disappointed that I've invested in people, I've including giving raises to people, and you don't even get a thank you. Just think about that. I mean, it's profound. So just be grateful and say please and say thank you. And really, we all have bad days. It happens. I've had 7 in 28 years. I can tell you what they are sometimes. but beyond the bad days, just remember, if you can be your true self, please and thank you. Your attitude is going to cement your future. That's my advice.
Okay, Gavin, let's wrap us up here.
Yeah, that gratitude thing is interesting, because I don't actually take it personally when people aren't grateful. But what I do is I think, okay, that's how they're going to act with the clients. I don't know about this, So I look at it more as a business thing. But it's all the stuff that we said encapsulated. I'd like to point out to the audience that we are all in the same boat here. We're making it up just like they are. We're here giving professional perspectives because we each have probably 30 years in the industry or something like that. But we're getting tested every day. We're in the same boat. We are figuring this out one step at a time as well. And I'm enjoying the process of what the new connectivity is. And I think it's really just about being creative on how to connect. And the arc of this discussion has been on what that personal connect is, because you have to get through this 2-dimensional screen and become more than just the person that operates the tools. It's who are you as a person, and be authentic about it so that we can read each other,
Okay. Well, I think this has answered a lot of questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions. I appreciate you all coming today. And I thank the panelists. You guys were great. You had lots of tips and opinions about different things, and I appreciate it. We're going to end this now, and next month in January we will have the 3rd in the series of Turmoil webinars. It will be how to network in an industry in turmoil. So hopefully you guys can tune in for that. And thank you everyone again for showing up, and I hope this helped, and happy holidays to everybody.
Thanks, Karen and Stephanie, for moderating.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie, as well. Thank you, Karen.